Top 1. The Antikythera mechanism. The year is 100 BCE, perhaps older, as far back as 200 BCE. You're at the bottom of the Aegean Sea off the coast of the Greek island of Antikythera. A sponge diver surfaces gasping, clutching a piece of corroded bronze. It's 1901. What he's found in the shipwreck will take over a century to understand. And when scientists finally decode it using X-ray CT scans in 2006, they'll realize something impossible. Someone built a computer 2,000 years before computers existed. In October of 1900, sponge divers discovered an ancient Roman shipwreck 45 meters underwater. Among the cargo of statues and pottery, they recovered lumps of corroded bronze. Initially dismissed as unimportant, one piece was later found to contain precisely cut gears. It sat in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens for decades, largely ignored until Yale professor Derek J. DeSola Price began serious study in the 1950s. What he found shouldn't exist. The Antikythera mechanism contains 30 or more bronze gears, with triangular teeth meshed in differential systems. This level of gear technology doesn't appear again in historical records until 14th century astronomical clocks over 1,300 years later. Radiocarbon dating of the wood in the mechanism, plus shipwreck context, dates it between 150 and 100 BCE. X-ray computed tomography in 2005 by Tony Freeth revealed 30 surviving gears. The original estimate suggests 37 gears total. The front dial shows a 365-day Egyptian calendar with zodiac positions. Rear dials predict solar and lunar eclipses using the 19-year Metonic cycle and the 223-month Saros cycle. The gear ratios are accurate to within 1 part in a million for calculating lunar anomaly. Inscriptions in Corinthian Greek name months from Corinth and Epirus calendars. The device predicted positions of the sun, moon, and planets, Mercury through Saturn, all visible to the naked eye. Michael Wright's 2005 reconstruction at Imperial College London proved it could track all 5 known planets using epicyclic gearing. The mechanism included a pin and slot device to account for the elliptical lunar orbit, what's known as Hipparchus's second lunar anomaly. James Evans and Alan Carman's analysis in the Journal for the History of Astronomy in 1998 showed sophisticated understanding of Babylonian astronomical theory. The mechanism represents the pinnacle of Hellenistic mathematical astronomy. Mainstream historians say it was built by skilled craftsmen working from theories of Hipparchus and Babylonian astronomical data. Likely a teaching tool or demonstration device for wealthy patrons. The technology existed briefly in Greek society, then was lost during the collapse of classical civilization. Knowledge of complex gearing wasn't needed for practical purposes, so it died out. Simple as that. But if this represents normal Greek technology, where are the predecessors? Complex gearing systems require generations of development, trial, error, and refinement. You don't jump straight to 37 gears meshed in differential systems. Yet we find no simpler versions, no prototypes, and no written descriptions of how to build one. The mechanism appears fully formed, like finding a smartphone in a world that just invented the telegraph. The Greek historian Cicero described a device built by Archimedes, who died in 212 BCE, that showed the motions of the sun, moon, and planets. A description matching the Antikythera mechanism perfectly. This suggests sophisticated astronomical computers existed even earlier. If Rome preserved one in Cicero's time and Greece built them regularly, how many were lost? What else did they build? Why does no ancient text describe how to construct such a device? Who trained the craftsmen capable of cutting gears to such precision? What tools were used to achieve modern engineering tolerances in bronze? Top 2, Greek fire from a device that predicted the future using the stars. We turn to a weapon that burned the future to ash, a formula so dangerous the empire that created it made sure it died with them. Greek fire, 672 CE, the walls of Constantinople, capital of the Byzantine Empire. Arab ships approach across the Bosphorus. Byzantine sailors pump bronze siphons mounted on their ships' prows. A stream of liquid fire erupts, clinging to enemy hulls. The substance can't be extinguished by water. It burns on the surface of the sea. Sailors jump overboard and ignite in the waves. This is Greek fire, the Byzantine Empire's most guarded secret. And the reason that secret was kept so well is that we still don't know how they made it. Greek fire first appears in historical records during the reign of Emperor Constantine IV, who ruled from 668 to 685 CE. According to Byzantine sources, the architect Callinicos of Heliopolis brought the formula to Constantinople after fleeing the Arab conquest of Syria. The Byzantines used it decisively in the First and Second Arab sieges of Constantinople in 674 to 678 and 717 to 718. It essentially saved Christian Europe from conquest. The formula was so secret it was known only to the imperial family and select chemists. It was never written down, passed orally through generations. When the Byzantine Empire fell in 1453, the secret died completely. Modern chemists have attempted reconstructions, but cannot replicate all described properties. Byzantine chronicler Theophanes recorded Greek fire's use destroying the Arab fleet in 678 CE. The Tactica of Emperor Leo VI, who ruled from 886 to 902 CE, describes deployment methods but deliberately omits the formula. Anna Komnene, Byzantine princess and historian, wrote in the Alexiad in the 12th century that the secret was known only to descendants of Callinicos. Historical accounts consistently describe a liquid that ignited on contact with water, stuck to surfaces, burned at extreme temperatures, and produced thick smoke. Weapons were deployed via bronze siphons, the kerosiphon, or hand siphon, or ceramic grenades. The Byzantine Navy maintained specialized ships called dromons, specifically designed to deploy Greek fire. It was used successfully in naval battles for over 700 years until the empire's decline. Penalties for revealing the formula included execution and divine curses according to imperial decree. Some scholars, like J.R. Partington in A History of Greek Fire and Gunpowder, published in 1960, suggest a petroleum-based mixture with additives like pine resin, sulfur, quicklime, and possibly naphtha. MIT researchers in 2002 tested theories, but couldn't replicate the water ignition property convincingly. Greek fire was likely a petroleum-based incendiary weapon enhanced with thickening agents and combustible additives. According to mainstream history, the Byzantines had access to natural petroleum deposits in Crimea and the Caucasus. The secret was simply good operational security and the technical challenge of creating pressurized delivery systems. When the empire declined, the specialized knowledge base shrank, trade routes were cut, and the formula was lost through simple attrition of experts. But operational security doesn't explain the thoroughness of the loss. For over 700 years, this weapon was produced and deployed. Sailors used it. Ships were built around it. Entire battle strategies depended on it. Yet not one written formula survived. Not one captured sample revealed its composition. The Arabs tried desperately to replicate it for centuries. They had samples. They had defectors. They had the same raw materials. They failed. The Crusaders, who fought alongside Byzantines for generations, never learned it. Even after Constantinople fell and Ottoman forces captured Byzantine arsenals, the secret remained lost. Was this really just petroleum and resin? Or was there something else? Some preparation method? Some catalytic process? Some knowledge of chemistry that went beyond medieval capabilities? The accounts describe properties that modern petroleum mixtures can't replicate: spontaneous ignition on water contact, extreme adhesion, impossible to extinguish. Some researchers have suggested the Byzantines discovered principles of chemical warfare that wouldn't be rediscovered until World War I. Others wonder if ancient texts in the Library of Alexandria, partially destroyed in Byzantine times, contained knowledge of pyrophoric substances, materials that self-ignite on air exposure, that later civilizations couldn't access. Top 3. Damascus steel. From a weapon of fire that conquered through destruction, we moved to a metal of such perfection it seemed almost alive, a blade that could split silk in midair and hair falling across its edge. Damascus steel. Peak production 1100 to 1700 CE, though origins traced to 300 CE or earlier. Damascus, Syria, and the Wootz steel furnaces of India, where crucible steel was born. A blacksmith in Damascus holds a blade to the light, Patterns ripple across its surface like flowing water, frozen in metal. This sword can slice through European armor, bend without breaking, and hold an edge that can shave hair after cutting through bone. By the 1750s, the technique will be gone. The furnaces will go cold, and modern metallurgists, even with electron microscopes and industrial forges, won't be able to replicate what a medieval smith did with charcoal and hammer. Damascus steel, or wood steel, was produced from iron ingots imported from India to Damascus and other Middle Eastern cities. The steel became legendary during the Crusades from 1095 to 1291, when European knights encountered swords that could cut through their inferior iron blades. European blacksmiths tried desperately to copy the technique, but failed. Production continued until the mid-1700s, then abruptly ceased. The technique was lost. Modern analysis reveals Damascus steel contains carbon nanotubes and cementite nanowires, structures that weren't scientifically understood until the 1990s and currently require high-tech industrial processes to manufacture. Medieval smiths were somehow creating nanotechnology with pre-industrial tools. Electron microscopy by J.D. Verhoeven in Materials Characterization, published in 2001, found carbon nanotubes in genuine Damascus steel samples. The steel contained 1 to 2% carbon, perfectly balanced for hardness and flexibility. The distinctive watered silk pattern, Damascus rose, or watering, results from carbide bands at a microscopic level. Swords tested by researchers could cut through gun barrels and maintain sharpness. Production required crucible steel woots from specific Indian mines in Karnataka and Tamil Nadu. Al-Kindi's 9th century treatise on swords and their kinds describes classification systems, but not manufacturing secrets. Studies by Peter Poffler in Nature in 2006 suggest trace elements like vanadium from Indian ores were essential. Temperature cycling and forging techniques had to be precisely controlled. Too hot and nanostructures were destroyed. The last known production was in the 1750s. By the 1790s, the technique was completely lost. Modern attempts at recreation by Alfred Pendray in 1998 and Verhoeven in 2003 produced similar patterns but not identical molecular structures. Damascus steel's production died because the specific iron ore mines in India that contained the right trace elements were depleted. The technique depended on impurities, vanadium, molybdenum, chromium, manganese, that modern pure steel lacks. When ore composition changed, the process no longer worked, and smiths didn't understand why because they didn't know about chemistry. Additionally, the advent of firearms made swords less militarily relevant, reducing demand and accelerating knowledge loss. But a depletion doesn't explain the perfection of the technique. To create carbon nanotubes, you need temperatures around 1200 degrees, precise carbon diffusion, and forging rhythms timed to molecular rearrangement. Medieval smiths had no microscopes, no thermometers, no understanding of crystalline structures, yet they consistently produced nano-enhanced steel. How? If it was simple trial and error, why did it take modern science decades with electron microscopes and controlled lab conditions to even approximate the results? And why, if we understand the theory now, can't we replicate the process exactly? Some researchers suggest the Damascus smiths inherited an ancient tradition of metalwork that encoded chemical principles in ritualistic practice, specific chants to count time, prayers marking temperature changes, secret additives passed master to apprentice. When the tradition broke, the embedded knowledge vanished. Others propose that ancient metallurgists had empirical understanding of atomic-scale material science that we've forgotten and are only now rediscovering. The Indus Valley civilization from 3300 to 1300 BCE had advanced metallurgy. Could Woot's techniques trace back 4,000 years to an even more sophisticated predecessor tradition? Top 4. Zhang Heng's seismoscope from Damascus. Where metalworkers forged molecular perfection, we travel east to China, where a single man invented a machine that could hear the earth scream. Zhang Heng's seismoscope. 132 CE, during the Han Dynasty reign of Emperor Shun, Luoyang, the eastern Han capital in what is now Henan Province, China. Inside an imperial building stands a bronze vessel, 2 meters tall, shaped like a wine jar. 8 dragon heads protrude from its sides, each holding a bronze ball in its jaws. Below each dragon sits a bronze toad, mouth open. When an earthquake strikes 500 kilometers away, too faint for humans to feel in the capital, one dragon releases its ball into the toad's mouth with a loud clang. Officials immediately know there is disaster to the west or east or south. They send aid before messengers arrive. This is impossible. Seismology wouldn't exist for another 1,700 years. Yet Zhang Heng built a working earthquake detector in the 2nd century. Zhang Heng, from 78 to 139 CE, was a polymath, astronomer, mathematician, inventor, geographer, and poet. His seismoscope, called Hufeng Didong Yi, or instrument for inquiring into the wind and the shaking of the earth, was installed in 132 CE Chinese historical texts, particularly the Book of Later Han, compiled by Fan Ye in the 5th century, record that the device successfully detected an earthquake in 138 CE in Longxi, western Gansu province, over 500 kilometers away, even though no shaking was felt in Luoyang. Days later, messengers confirmed the quake. The device could determine the direction of distant earthquakes with no understanding of seismic waves, wave propagation, or modern seismology. The mechanism has been lost. No original survives, and the exact internal design remains disputed, despite reconstruction attempts. Fan Ye's Book of Later Han, chapter 59, provides the primary historical account. The device was 2 meters 8 inches in diameter, made of bronze. 8 dragon heads corresponded to 8 cardinal directions: north, south, east, west, northeast, northwest, southeast, southwest. Only one ball would drop per seismic event, indicating the direction of the epicenter. The 138 CE Longxi earthquake was detected with no perceptible shaking in Luoyang, proving long-distance sensitivity. Historical texts describe the internal mechanism as a central pillar, Dao Zhu, sensitive to directional movement. Modern reconstruction attempts began in 1875. Chinese seismologist Wang Zhenduo created a model in 1936. The Institute of Geophysics, China Earthquake Administration, created a new model in 2005 based on a pendulum mechanism. The 2005 reconstruction was tested against real seismic data and successfully indicated direction in controlled experiments. Zhang Heng's device predates European pendulum seismoscopes by 1,600 plus years. Zhang Heng likely used a suspended pendulum mechanism that would swing toward the earthquake direction. When seismic waves, P waves, arrived, faster but undetectable to humans, the pendulum's inertia would cause it to lag, triggering a lever mechanism that opened one dragon's jaw. This is clever engineering, but not magical. The design was lost because of China's bureaucratic and cultural upheavals at the end of the Han Dynasty. Subsequent dynasties disrupted knowledge transmission. Additionally, the device may have been viewed as more ceremonial than practical by later administrations. But reconstructing a device that should work is different from reconstructing the device that did work. Modern attempts require precise calibration, sensitive pendulums, and dozens of iterations. Zhang Heng built a functioning seismoscope in one attempt. At least no records mention failed prototypes. How did he understand that P waves arrive before S waves without any conception of seismic wave types? How did he calibrate the trigger sensitivity to ignore local vibrations, footsteps, carts, storms, but respond to distant earthquakes? The historical record says it worked reliably enough that imperial officials trusted it to dispatch aid. That implies a level of empirical testing and refinement that suggests either extraordinary genius or inherited knowledge. Could Zhang Heng have had access to older texts or traditions? China's history is punctuated by mass book burnings, Qin Dynasty 213 BCE, and dynasty transitions that destroyed records. Some researchers suggest ancient Chinese scientists had empirical knowledge of wave mechanics that survived in fragmented form. Others note that the device's design, 8 directions, cosmological symbolism, might encode lost principles of resonance and direction finding that went beyond simple pendulums. The fact that it was so precise and never replicated in subsequent Chinese history suggests singular genius or recovery of lost knowledge. Top 5. The Baghdad Battery. From a machine that listened to the earth, we descend underground to a mystery sealed in clay jars, where ancient hands may have harnessed the invisible force of electricity. The Baghdad battery, 250 BCE to 250 CE, the Parthian period, though some date it to the Sasanian period, 224 to 650 CE. Kujut Rabu near Baghdad, Iraq, discovered during excavation in 1936. German archaeologist Wilhelm König lifts a clay jar from the soil. Inside, a copper cylinder, an iron rod suspended by asphalt, and evidence of corrosion patterns. He pours in an acidic liquid, vinegar or wine, and a voltmeter needle twitches. The jar is 2,000 years old and it's generating electricity. König publishes his theory in 1940. The Parthians built batteries. The academic world dismisses him, but no one can explain what else these jars were for. In 1936, while excavating at Kujut Rabu, an ancient Parthian site near Baghdad, German archaeologist Wilhelm König discovered several clay jars with unusual construction. The jars contained copper cylinders, inside which were iron rods suspended by asphalt or bitumen stoppers. König was director of the National Museum of Iraq at the time. He recognized the configuration as similar to a modern galvanic cell. In 1940, he published Ein galvanisches Element aus der Parterzeit, suggesting they were ancient batteries. If these were batteries, it implies ancient Mesopotamian understanding of electrochemistry, 1,800 years before Alessandro Volta invented the first battery in 1799 CE, and 2,000 years before Michael Faraday formalized electromagnetic induction in 1831 CE. The idea that pre-industrial civilizations harnessed electricity contradicts the standard narrative of technological progress. The jars are 13 to 14 centimeters tall terracotta vessels with copper cylinders sealed with asphalt. Iron rods are suspended inside copper cylinders without touching the walls. Corrosion patterns on the copper are consistent with acidic electrolyte exposure. Willard Gray at General Electric High Voltage Laboratory replicated the device in 1940 and generated 1.5 to 2 volts using grape juice as an electrolyte. Multiple similar jars were found at Seleucia on the Tigris and Ctesiphon sites. The discovery predates modern understanding that copper plus iron plus electrolyte equals a galvanic cell. A Mythbusters 2005 episode replicated the battery and generated current, confirming functionality. It is dated to the Parthian Empire, 247 BCE to 224 CE, based on pottery style and site stratigraphy. Some jars showed signs of asphalt sealing, suggesting intentional closure and possible liquid contents. Archaeologists argue these were likely used for storing sacred scrolls. The copper cylinder protected parchment from moisture, the iron rod was a support, and the asphalt sealed the top. Alternatively, they may have been vessels for unknown chemical processes unrelated to electricity, perhaps acidic solutions for metalworking or tanning. The fact they could generate voltage is coincidental. Ancient peoples had no concept of electricity, no applications for it, no light bulbs, no motors. So there's no reason to believe they deliberately created batteries. Koenig's interpretation reflects modern observer bias, seeing what we know, not what they intended. But the scroll storage theory has problems. Why use iron inside copper? Iron corrodes, damaging parchments. Why seal with asphalt when simpler lids existed? And if they were random containers, why the consistent construction? Always copper outside, iron inside, asphalt seal. The configuration is too specific. Moreover, ancient texts do describe mysterious properties of certain metals and liquids. Pliny the Elder wrote about electric fish, torpedo rays, generating shocks. Could ancient observers have noticed similar effects with metal combinations in acidic solutions? And if they accidentally discovered electrochemical reactions, why wouldn't they experiment? Some researchers like Dr. Arne Eggebrecht at the Hildesheim Museum proposed the batteries were used for electroplating, coating objects with thin gold or silver layers. Eggebrecht successfully gold-plated a silver figurine using a Baghdad battery replica in 1978. This would explain the need for electrical current and align with evidence of ancient gilding techniques that historians struggle to explain. How did pre-industrial cultures achieve uniform thin metal coatings? Other theories suggest use in electrotherapy. Ancient texts describe treatments for pain using torpedo ray shocks. Perhaps batteries provided a controllable alternative. Or religious purposes. Statues of gods that tingled when touched might inspire awe. Top 6. Roman concrete. From invisible forces trapped in clay, we surface into the light of Rome, where another lost secret held together an empire built of stone and water. Roman concrete. Peak used 200 BCE to 476 CE, lost from around 500 CE until rediscovery in the modern era. The Pantheon in Rome. The harbors of Caesarea, structures throughout the Mediterranean. The Pantheon has stood for 1,100 years. Its dome, still the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome, has no cracks, no steel rebar, no modern additives. It was poured in 128 CE and remains more durable than most 20th century concrete buildings, which crumble after 50 to 100 years. Roman concrete grows stronger with time, especially in seawater. By 500 CE, the recipe was lost. It took 1,500 years to figure out why theirs was better. Roman concrete, opus cementitium, was used throughout the empire for monumental structures, aqueducts, harbors, the Colosseum, the Pantheon, baths, and roads. After the fall of Rome around 476 CE, the technique vanished. Medieval builders used stone and mortar, but lost the knowledge of hydraulic concrete that hardens underwater. It wasn't until the 18th and 19th centuries that European engineers rediscovered similar techniques, and only in the 21st century have scientists understood why Roman concrete was superior. Roman concrete doesn't degrade, it self-heals. When cracks form, rainwater reacts with calcium oxide, quicklime, in the mix, creating new calcium carbonate crystals that fill cracks. Modern concrete lacks this property. Additionally, Roman seawater concrete grows stronger over centuries, while modern concrete erodes in saltwater. How did pre-industrial engineers design a superior material? The Pantheon dome, 43.3 meters in diameter, built in 128 CE, remains intact with no reinforcement. Roman harbors like Caesarea Maritima, 22 BCE, have submerged concrete structures still solid after 2,000 years. Analysis by Marie Jackson at UC Berkeley in 2017 found Roman seawater concrete contains aluminous tobermarite crystals, a rare, extremely durable mineral. Romans used volcanic ash, pozzolana, from Pozzuoli near Naples, mixing it with lime and seawater. The volcanic ash-lime reaction, pozzolanic reaction, creates calcium aluminum silicate hydrate, CaSH, binding material. Modern concrete uses Portland cement, invented in 1824, which degrades in seawater due to sulfate and chloride attack. The Colosseum, 72 to 80 CE, concrete foundations have withstood earthquakes and millennia of weathering. In 2023, MIT and Harvard researchers Admir Masick and colleagues in Science Advances discovered the self-healing mechanism. Lime clasts from hot mixing create calcium oxide reservoirs that precipitate calcium carbonate in cracks when water enters. Vitruvius's De Architectura, 25 BCE, describes concrete mixing but doesn't fully explain the chemical principles. The Romans stumbled upon an excellent formula through regional availability of volcanic ash and pragmatic experimentation. Pozzolana from Vesuvius had unique chemical properties. When the empire collapsed, trade networks broke, regional materials became unavailable, and the knowledge holders, engineers, architects, died or dispersed. Additionally, medieval Europe prioritized stonemasonry for prestige and religious symbolism. Concrete was seen as Roman and pagan, so it fell out of favor. Eventually, the technique was simply forgotten, not because it was suppressed, but because circumstances changed. But forgetting implies gradual decline. Roman concrete wasn't just good, it was better. Aqueducts functioned perfectly. Harbors served critical military and economic functions. When Rome fell, successor states still needed infrastructure. Byzantine engineers continued building great structures, yet they didn't use Roman concrete formulas. Why? If the recipe was written down, Vitruvius documented it, why couldn't later civilizations replicate it? The answer may lie in what Vitruvius didn't write: the intuitive knowledge of mixing ratios, curing times, ingredient sourcing, and volcanic ash quality. Written formulas couldn't capture the master builder's eye for material quality and environmental adaptation. Some researchers suggest Roman concrete represents lost understanding of materials chemistry. The Romans somehow knew that reactive hot mixing, quicklime addition, would create self-healing mechanisms, chemistry that wasn't formally understood until the 21st century. Were they consciously engineering at the molecular level through empirical observation, or did they inherit older techniques? Megalithic Mediterranean structures predate Rome by millennia. Could Etruscan, Greek, or even older Bronze Age builders have used similar binding technologies now lost except in Roman adaptation? The precision and durability hint at systematic knowledge, not lucky accidents. Top 7. Archimedes' death ray from the concrete that held an empire together. We turn to the weapon that nearly destroyed one, a mirror that turned the sun into a sword. Archimedes' death ray. 214 to 212 BCE during the siege of Syracuse in the Second Punic War. Syracuse, Sicily. As Roman naval forces commanded by Marcus Claudius Marcellus approach the harbor, the Roman fleet closes on Syracuse. On the city walls, soldiers adjust massive bronze mirrors. The surface flashes. Multiple beams of concentrated sunlight converge on the lead ship's sail. Smoke rises. The sail ignites. Within moments, the ship is ablaze. The Romans retreat in horror. How can sunlight burn warships? The historian Lucian would later write that Archimedes set fire to the Roman fleet by means of a burning glass. The question is, did it actually happen, or is this legend? And if legend, why did the story persist for 2,000 years? Archimedes, 287 to 212 BCE, was the greatest mathematician and inventor of antiquity, living in Greek Syracuse. When Rome besieged the city, Archimedes designed war machines, catapults, cranes, the claw of Archimedes that lifted ships from the water and smashed them, and allegedly a system of mirrors that focused sunlight to ignite enemy ships. Ancient sources, including Lucian, 2nd century CE, and Anthemius of Tralles, 6th century CE, and later Byzantine texts, describe this heat ray. However, earlier historians like Polybius and Livy, closer to the events, don't mention it. Focusing sunlight to ignite wood or sail at a distance requires precise parabolic mirrors, perfect coordination, and favorable conditions, a sunny day and a stationary target. Ancient bronze mirrors were polished but not optically precise. The physics is plausible, but marginal. The logistics are challenging. If it worked, why isn't it mentioned by eyewitnesses? If it didn't work, why did the legend take hold? Lucian of Samosata's Hippias, the 2nd century CE, writes Archimedes set the ships of the enemy on fire by means of a burning glass. Anthemius of Tralles on burning mirrors, 6th century CE, architect of Hagia Sophia, describes the theoretical basis for focusing mirrors. Galen, 2nd to 3rd century CE, mentions Archimedes' burning glass in On Temperaments. Diocles wrote on burning mirrors around 200 BCE, describing parabolic mirror mathematics, suggesting optical knowledge existed in Archimedes' time. Modern experiments. MIT students in 2005 used 127 mirrors to ignite a wooden ship model at a 30-meter distance. Mythbusters in 2006 tested with 300 mirrors and found ignition possible but impractical under realistic conditions. The University of Thessaloniki in 1973 successfully set plywood on fire at 50 meters using 70 mirrors. Earlier historians Polybius and Histories, the 2nd century BCE, and Livy, around 27 BCE, describe Archimedes' war machines but omit burning mirrors. Archimedes was killed by a Roman soldier during Syracuse's fall in 212 BCE, preventing documentation of his methods. Plutarch's Life of Marcellus, around 100 CE, describes Archimedes' devastating war machines, but is ambiguous on mirrors. The heat ray is likely an exaggeration or conflation. Archimedes did build remarkable defensive weapons, mechanical catapults, cranes, perhaps even early cannon-like devices using steam pressure. These impressed and terrified the Romans. Later writers, knowing Archimedes' brilliance and the work on optics and burning glasses in the Hellenistic period, embellished the story. The burning mirror became a symbol of his genius rather than literal history. Modern experiments show it's theoretically possible, but not militarily practical. Coordination of dozens of mirror operators, stationary targets, perfect weather, real battles are chaotic. The legend grew because it's a great story. But why would later scientists like Anthemius bother writing technical treatises on burning mirrors if the device never existed? Anthemius was a serious engineer who built the Hagia Sophia's dome, not a fantasist. His treatise describes mathematical principles for parabolic reflectors, suggesting he took the concept seriously. Additionally, Archimedes had proven expertise in optics. He wrote Catoptrica on mirrors, now lost. The Romans described Syracuse's defenses as terrifying and withdrew from assaults repeatedly. What scared them if not novel weapons? And if it was simple catapults and cranes, why didn't the Romans, master engineers themselves, dismiss Archimedes' devices as conventional? Perhaps the death ray was less dramatic than legend suggests, but still effective. Concentrated sunlight could blind sailors, cause confusion, or ignite exposed pitch or cloth. A barrage of focused beams doesn't need to incinerate instantly. Smoke and flames on a wooden ship create panic, break formations, and force retreat. Archimedes may have designed a coordinated system where operators track targets using simple geometry. He invented coordinate systems and understood focal points. The weapon worked well enough to be memorable, but not well enough to save Syracuse, and later generations, impressed by the concept, inflated its effectiveness. Or alternatively, was there secret knowledge of lenses and optics that didn't survive? The Nimrud lens, 8th century BCE, Assyrian crystal lens, and Viking Age crystal sunstones suggest ancient optical technology existed. Could Archimedes have used early lenses to enhance mirror focusing? Top 8. The Lycurgus cup. From a weapon that bent light, we turn to a cup that bends it still, a piece of Roman glass that shouldn't exist for another 1600 years. The Lycurgus cup. 4th century CE, late Roman Empire, likely 290 to 325 CE Rome, created for an elite patron, currently housed in the British Museum, London. Hold the cup to the light and it glows green. Shine a light through it and it turns blood red. This is the Lycurgus cup, a Roman glass cage cup depicting King Lycurgus ensnared by vines. When researchers analyzed it in 1990, they discovered something impossible. The glass contains gold and silver nanoparticles, 50 to 100 nanometers in diameter. The Romans were using nanotechnology 1,600 years before the term was invented. The Lycurgus cup was acquired by the British Museum in the 1950s. It's a cage cup, or diatretta, an incredibly rare and difficult form of Roman glasswork, where the decorative outer layer is carved from a single solid glass block and connected to the inner cup by thin glass bridges. Fewer than 50 such cups survive. What makes this one unique is its dichroic property. It changes color based on light direction. Modern analysis revealed why. Colloidal metal nanoparticles embedded in the glass matrix. Nanoparticle optics, the science behind why nanoscale metal particles change light absorption and scattering, wasn't understood until the 1990s. Gold nanoparticles 70 nanometers in diameter exhibit plasmon resonance, causing wavelength-specific light filtering. The Romans created this effect without microscopes, spectroscopy, or nanotechnology theory. Electron microscopy by Ian Freestone and colleagues in Gold Bulletin in 2007 found gold-silver alloy nanoparticles at around 70 nanometers diameter. Particles are dispersed throughout the glass at around 330 parts per million concentration. The glass appears jade green in reflected light and ruby red in transmitted light due to the surface plasmon resonance effect. The effect is wavelength dependent. Green light reflects, red light transmits. It is the only dichroic Roman glass object known. Its uniqueness suggests a rare or lost technique. The cup dates to around 300 to 325 CE based on artistic style and archaeological context. Diatretta cage cups required extraordinary skill, carved from solid glass blocks then undercut to free the decorative layer. Modern attempts to recreate dichroic glass require precise nanoparticle synthesis in controlled lab conditions. No Roman texts describe this technique or understanding of why it works. Gang Logan Liu at the University of Illinois in 2013 proposed using similar nanostructured glass for ultra-sensitive chemical detection. The Romans accidentally created nanoparticles. Glassmakers added gold and silver, possibly for color, possibly as contaminants from recycled glass, and through heating and cooling cycles, the metals precipitated into nanoparticle suspensions. They didn't understand why the glass changed color, but they liked the effect and painstakingly crafted this single masterpiece. The technique wasn't reproducible because they didn't control particle size systematically. It was luck. That's why no other examples survive. When the glassmaker died, the recipe died too. Cage cup production itself was already rare due to extreme difficulty. Adding unpredictable color effects made reproduction nearly impossible. But the nanoparticle distribution in the Lycurgus cup is suspiciously uniform. If it were accidental, you'd expect clumping, variation, and inconsistent color. Instead, the dichroic effect works consistently across the entire cup. That suggests control. To achieve 70 nanometer particle size, you need specific temperatures and cooling rates. Too hot and particles grow too large, no color shift. Too cool and they don't form. The Romans hit the precise parameters needed for plasmon resonance once by accident and then decided to carve 300 plus hours of intricate glasswork into this accidental result. It seems more likely they had empirical knowledge, perhaps trial and error over generations, of how to create this effect and chose to use it for a single, spectacular showpiece. Could the Romans have inherited glass-making knowledge from older traditions? Egyptian faience, glazed ceramic from 3,000 plus years earlier, used copper and other metals to create brilliant blues. Phoenician glassmakers traded techniques across the Mediterranean. Roman glassmaking reached its zenith in the 1st to 4th centuries CE, but the roots go back millennia. Some researchers speculate that ancient glassmakers developed empirical recipes encoding nanotech effects without understanding atomic theory. Much like ancient metallurgists created Damascus steel's nanotubes, the knowledge was embedded in practice, not theory, making it fragile. Lose the master craftsman, lose the technique. Top 9 Stradivarius violins. From Roman glass that played with light at the nanoscale, we jump forward to Renaissance Italy, where another mystery echoes through concert halls, a sound that no modern science can recreate. The secret of Stradivarius violins. Peak production 1700 to 1720 CE, during Antonio Stradivari's golden period in Cremona, Italy. Cremona, Lombardy, northern Italy, the birthplace of the world's greatest violin makers. A Stradivarius violin sells at auction for 15.9 million. It was made in 1721 by Antonio Stradivari, who crafted roughly 100 instruments between 1666 and 1737. About 650 survive. They are universally considered the finest violins ever made. Richer tone, greater projection, unique timbral qualities. Modern luthier using precisely the same wood, the same tools, and the same measurements cannot replicate the sound. Stradivari's secret died with him. Antonio Stradivari, 1644 to 1737, worked in Cremona, Italy, the center of stringed instrument making in the 17th and 18th centuries. His violins, violas, and cellos are legendary. Alongside the Guarneri family, especially Giuseppe Guarneri del Gesù, Cremona produced instruments never equaled. Despite centuries of study, dendrochronology, tree ring dating, chemical analysis, acoustic testing, CT scans, no one has definitively explained why Stradivarius violins sound different or better. Modern acoustic science can measure every aspect of a Stradivarius: wood density, varnish chemistry, plate tuning frequencies, resonance modes. Modern luthiers have built violins matching these measurements exactly. Yet blind listening tests by professional musicians consistently identify Stradivarius instruments as having unique qualities. If we can measure everything, why can't we replicate it? Approximately 650 Stradivarius instruments survive out of around 2,100 made. Violins, violas, cellos, guitars, harps. Instruments made during Stradivari's golden period, 1700 to 1720, are most prized. A 2012 study by Claudia Fritz and Pinas, blind tests found professional soloists couldn't reliably distinguish Stradivarius from modern violins, but identified different qualities. Joseph Nagavari, a Texas A&M biochemist, analyzed wood chemicals from 2006 to 2016 and found unique mineral treatments, possibly from Venetian shipbuilding preservatives or alpine wood processing. Dendrochronology shows Stradivari used alpine spruce that grew during the Maunder minimum, 1645 to 1715. Cooler climate equals slower growth equals denser wood. CT scans reveal wood density variations in asymmetries that violinists claim are intentional for acoustic balance. Varnish analyses in 2009, Analytical and Bioanalytical Chemistry, found borax, fluorides, and chromium, unusual mineral content suggesting chemical pretreatment. Acoustic measurements show Stradivarius violins have distinctive frequency response peaks around 2 to 4 kHz, the vocal speech range, giving warmth. Fungal treatment theory, Francis Schwartz, 2008. Wood may have been intentionally aged using specific fungi that pre-digest lignin, altering acoustic properties. No written documentation exists explaining Stradivarius-specific techniques, wood treatments, or varnish recipes. The Stradivarius mystique is partly myth, partly exceptional craftsmanship. Stradivari was a master artisan with decades of experience, access to high-quality alpine wood, and meticulous attention to detail. His violins are very good, perhaps the best, but not impossibly so. Modern luthiers create instruments professionals can't distinguish in blind tests. The magic is cultural cachet, historical value, and confirmation bias. People expect a $15 million violin to sound better, so it does. The lost secret is simply accumulated expertise that modern luthiers also possess. We haven't lost anything. We've just romanticized the past. But even skeptics agree Stradivarius instruments have something. Musicians who've played both modern and antique violins describe Stradivarius as having more colors or easier projection. These are subjective, yes, but consistent across centuries of players. And the chemical analyses are objective. The wood is different. Whether it's climate, Maunder minimum coal-producing denser wood, chemical treatment, borax minerals, fungal aging, or varnish formulas, Stradivari's violins are materially distinct from modern instruments. The question isn't whether they're different. They are. The question is whether we understand what makes them different and whether we can intentionally recreate it. So far, no. Perhaps the secret isn't a single ingredient or technique, but an entire workflow, a holistic tradition of wood selection, seasoning, treatment, and finishing past master to apprentice through demonstration, not documentation. Stradivari worked alongside Niccolo Amati and absorbed Cremonese traditions going back generations. When the tradition died, Cremona's luthier families declined in the late 1700s. The embedded knowledge vanished. Modern science can analyze the result, but not recreate the process. Think of Damascus steel or Roman concrete. We know the output, but intuitive mastery can't be reverse engineered from chemical composition alone. The secret might be in the hands, timing, and environmental sensitivity that no manual can capture. Top 10. The Dendrolite. From sound waves frozen in wood, we return to the ancient world for our final mystery, where light may have burned in Egyptian temples millennia before Edison. The Dendrolite. Relief carvings dated to the Ptolemaic period around 50 BCE, though temple construction spans earlier dynasties. Temple of Hathor at Dendera, Egypt, in underground crypts beneath the main temple complex. You're standing in a stone chamber beneath the Temple of Hathor. Your flashlight catches a relief carved into the wall. At first, it looks like any Egyptian depiction. Gods, lotus flowers, symbolic objects. But then you see it, a large bulb-shaped object with a serpent extending inside. The bulb sits atop a pillar that looks disturbingly like an insulator. Cables emerge from the base. If you knew nothing about ancient Egypt, you might think you're looking at a technical diagram. In 1992, engineers and Egyptologists clashed over a controversial question. Are we looking at ancient electrical lighting? The Dendera temple complex contains underground crypts with reliefs depicting unusual objects. The most famous is in Crypt 5, showing what appears to be elongated objects resembling modern light bulbs, complete with internal filaments, serpents, supports, and cable-like connections to boxes inscribed with hieroglyphs. Austrian engineer Peter Krasse and German archaeologist Reinhard Habeck popularized the ancient electricity interpretation in the 1990s. Egyptologists strongly dispute this, calling it pseudo-archaeology. If these reliefs depict functional electrical devices, it implies ancient Egyptians understood electricity, electrical generation, insulation, and illumination principles over 2,000 years before Volta, Edison, and Tesla. There is no evidence of copper wiring, generators, or other necessary infrastructure. Yet the reliefs are oddly specific and technically detailed. The reliefs are in crypts 5 and 6 of the Dendera Temple complex, built during the Ptolemaic period, 305 to 30 BCE, over older structures. The bulb object is around 1.5 meters tall in the carving, oriented horizontally on a D-jed pillar, a symbol of stability or Osiris's backbone. The internal filament is a serpent, a symbol of energy, Ra, or divine power in Egyptian iconography. At the base are objects resembling insulators and cable connectors. Hieroglyphic inscriptions refer to Ba, soul or energy, emerging from the lotus. Engineer Peter Krasa built a working model in 1992 using speculative ancient techniques, a Crookes tube, early cathode ray tube, proving the concept. Austrian experimental archaeologist Walter Garn in 1996 created a functional replica using period-appropriate materials. Mainstream Egyptologists like Wolfgang Waitkus, 1992, identified the objects as lotus flowers, the serpent as Harsamtis, god of fertility, and the pillars as Diyed symbols, entirely mythological. No evidence of copper wires, batteries, beyond the disputed Baghdad battery, or electrical infrastructure exists in the Egyptian archaeological record. Temple lighting puzzle. Deep interior chambers show no soot deposits from torches, suggesting alternative light sources, possibly mirrors, skylights, or very efficient oil lamps. The Dendera reliefs are purely symbolic, depicting mythological creation themes. The bulb is a lotus flower from which a serpent god, Harsamtis or solar power, emerges at creation. The Diyed pillar represents stability and Osiris. The cables are sacred ropes or symbolic connectors. Egyptians used oil lamps, torches, and reflected sunlight, mirrors and shafts, to illuminate temples. The lack of soot in some chambers suggests efficient lamp design or careful maintenance, not electricity. Engineers and fringe theorists see electrical devices because they're projecting modern technology onto ancient religious symbolism, a classic case of pareidolia and confirmation bias. But the precision of the reliefs is striking. Egyptian art is symbolic, yes, but also often surprisingly literal. Depictions of tools, ships, and architectural elements are accurate enough for archaeologists to reconstruct techniques. Why would this carving be purely symbolic when so many details align with electrical engineering? The cables exit from boxes marked with hieroglyphs, meaning energy storehouse. The serpent energy inside a bulb-like enclosure is supported by insulators. And there's the soot problem. How did Egyptians illuminate deep chambers for the detailed painting and carving required? Torches produce smoke. Where is it? Mirrors only work with direct sunlight, not in multi-chambered crypts. Oil lamps with wicks leave residue, minimal but detectable. Yet some chambers show no traces. Could the Dendera relief depict a lost technology? Perhaps not electricity as we know it, but some form of controlled light generation. The Baghdad battery proves electrochemical knowledge existed in ancient Mesopotamia. If batteries existed, could they power rudimentary light sources? A Crookes tube, vacuum tube with electrodes, can emit light with low voltage. Primitive but possible with ancient glass blowing, Romans made glass tubes, and copper electrodes. Or alternatively, were these reliefs symbolic records of observed phenomena? Ball lightning, St. Elmo's fire, bioluminescence that ancient priests interpreted as divine and attempted to recreate in religious contexts. Some researchers propose the objects represent ritual lamps used in a mystery cult, possibly using phosphorescent materials or reflective optics we haven't yet identified. From the gears of Antikythera to the glowing reliefs of Dendera, we've walked through 10 impossibilities, 10 technologies that shouldn't exist, 10 secrets that history somehow erased. These aren't isolated curiosities. They form a pattern, a map of forgotten genius. The Antikythera mechanism reveals knowledge of precision engineering centuries ahead of its time. Greek fire shows chemical mastery that modern science struggles to replicate. Damascus steel embedded nanotechnology in metal before microscopes existed. Zhongheng's seismoscope detected earthquakes at impossible distances. The Baghdad battery hints at electrochemistry in ancient Mesopotamia. Roman concrete self-heals after 2,000 years, while ours crumbles in decades. Archimedes bent light into a weapon. The Lycurgus cup manipulates photons at the nanoscale. Stradivarius captured sound in wood through techniques still not understood. And the Dendera reliefs suggest the Egyptians may have known something about light and energy we've dismissed as myth. The standard narrative says these are anomalies, brilliant accidents, isolated geniuses, or techniques lost due to historical accidents. Knowledge fragmented when empires fell, libraries burned, oral traditions died. That's plausible, reasonable, safe. But look closer. These accidents require deep understanding, not just of what worked, but why it worked. You don't create carbon nanotubes by chance. You don't build astronomical computers without mathematics. You don't formulate chemical weapons without systematic experimentation. These inventors understood principles we like to think were discovered in the modern era. If these stories change the way you look at the history of human ingenuity, please subscribe and like the channel. We are unearthing the history they tried to bury. Help us plant the seeds for the future. The next treasure of the past will be revealed soon.